you.
Okay, chemical moles converting baking soda to table salt. Converting one thing to another, first of all, that means a chemical change, a chemical reaction. Right? If you change the identity of it, that's chemical. Now you just change a property, like, from solid to a liquid, that's a physical change. But we're talking a chemical change in this lab, which means we have a reaction, and we could write a balanced equation for that reaction. And we could think about the relationship between how much we start with and how much we end with. And we do that not in terms of grams, but in terms of moles. Do I start with 1 mole, and do I produce 2 moles of the product? Those type of questions. All right, and therefore the title of this is Chemical Moles, Converting Baking Soda to Table Salt. Now, baking soda, right here, is actually sodium hydrogen carbonate. And you can look up that, it's in your notebook as well, your lab notebook, but you can look up that formula, NaHCO3. And when you react that with acids such as hydrochloric acid, HCl, we can get a chemical reaction occurring which will produce table salt. And table salt is sodium chloride. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add the boiling chips to the test tubes. With just little glass beads. You can see them down there in the test tubes like that. Help the boiling to stay in the test tube rather than bump out of the test tubes. And now the baking soda, we'll add a little bit to the bottom of each one. There you go, a little bit down in there. And I'm just doing kind of a tipful on the spatula each time, just so it's at the very bottom. So. And now we have to weigh each one. So our first one, test tube A, we'll come over here and tear our balance. So it reads 0 with nothing on it. Add our test tube on it. And you want to record that data in your notebook, or in your data sheet, I should say. All right, there's the first test tube A. Do the same thing here, test tube B. Tear it, make sure it reads 0. All right, one more time. There we go. There's test tube B. Okay. And test tube C. Same idea. Okay. Okay. So we have our baking soda down in each test tube. Now we add the other reactant, which is the hydrochloric acid, 3 molar. These will react together. Now this is hydrochloric acid in water. I mean, it's not pure HCl, it's dissolved in water. So we'll see the evidence for a chemical reaction as I run some down the side of the test tube. So you get the fizzing going on there. That's evidence that a chemical reaction is occurring. I don't want to add any more than I need to, just enough to get this to react. So I'm going to take that and just kind of stir it up a little bit here. Okay, and now we'll see if there's any more reaction with a little bit more added. Yep, I'm still getting a reaction, so I want to keep adding this until it's fully reacted. Again, just making sure I keep it stirred up each time. Just a little bit more bubbling that time when I added it. So let me stir it well, mix it well, and test it with just another drop or two. No more fizzing, no more bubbling, so it's fully reacted. So at this point, we fully reacted the sodium bicarbonate and produced table salt, sodium chloride. The gas coming out was carbon dioxide gas. Of course, it doesn't stay in the test tube. It bubbles out and gets released to the atmosphere. And the other thing that's left behind is, of course, the water that the HCl was originally in as well. So here's test tube B. We're doing the same thing, making sure we fully react it, stir it up. As long as I'm seeing that bubbling occurring, I know the reaction is still going. Let's add a little more and see if we get further reaction. Just a little bit of bubbling when I added that last little bit, so I'm really close. Let's let this calm down here and mix it up well. And I'll add a couple more drops to see if we've got to the end or not. There we go. Good. And so that's fully reacted in B. Test tube C. Same idea. Get that reaction going. Test it with a little more. A little more bubbling. Very good. So we have fully reacted each test tube at this point. Again, we started with HCl and sodium bicarbonate. Now what's in those test tubes are the products, which are sodium chloride, water, and the other product, CO2, the gas, which came up and away. All right, great. Now we just need to do the next step, which says to gently heat the test tubes over a Bunsen burner. The idea is we want to find out how much sodium chloride is in this salt water down here. We want to just evaporate the water away, leaving the sodium chloride behind. We'll do that with the Bunsen burner. And so we'll turn the gas on and light it up. So. And when you do this, you want to gently heat it. And you want to make sure it's pointed away from everybody, because as you heat a small amount of liquid in a test tube like this, as it gets hot, it could jump out of the test tube and go shooting right out of it. And so you really want to be careful. You want to make sure not to injure anybody, of course. But also, you don't want to lose any of that product that you just created. If it comes shooting out of the test tube, then it's gone, and you're not going to be able to get it recovered. So I'm starting to see it bubble a little bit down there, and so I'm going to be a little more careful now. By bubbling, I mean boiling. The water is boiling. So just kind of run it through that flame, and it will slowly evaporate away here and boil off. You just want to be very patient with this and not go too slow. If you look at the top of the test tube, you see the steam escaping. Hopefully you can see that. And you could hopefully also see it kind of bouncing around in the bottom there a little bit and popping every now and then. This is again why you want to be a little bit slow in this, a little bit careful. You don't want a vigorous boil. It'll just go too quickly if we do that. And you can see, actually, we're starting to get the salt crusting a little bit up there on the side of the test tube. I'm kind of shaking it a little bit too, so that any boiling gas will get released and not trapped down there. And that helps it to keep it in the test tube a little bit. So we're getting pretty low on the volume here. We're almost here, almost done. The water evaporates away. Yeah, And lots of salt left there on the bottom. Almost there. Now when there's just a little bit left, this is where you want to be very careful. This is where a little bit of water trapped inside that solid salt could make it pop right out of that test tube very easily. I still see some steam coming out the top, so I know it's still releasing a little bit of that water. We want to get it all the way dry. And so as long as I'm seeing that steam coming out still, I know I'm not there yet. Very intentionally careful on this, keeping it agitated. But you'll know when you're finally dry, it'll stop steaming at the top of the test tube. So I think we're pretty close. A little bit coming off still. Never look down into the test tube. As tempting as that may be, if it comes shooting out there, it's going to shoot right at your face. And that would be really, really bad. Now, one of the things too is I want to heat the whole test tube as well. That color is when the metal holder goes through the flame. That's kind of cool. But anyway, you want to heat the whole test tube for that matter. You don't want any water sticking to the side on the top either. Okay, so you see now I really don't have any more steam coming out of the test tube. This is looking really good. And I'll let you look closely at that. Zoom in. We've got just a bunch of salt, and that's the sodium chloride, the table salt, crusting all on the inside of that test tube. Okay, 1 down, 2 to go. Definitely don't want to smell the steam coming out the top either, because it is possible that there's some leftover HCl, hydrochloric acid. In fact, it's almost guaranteed you have a little excess of it, because we added it until the sodium bicarbonate was all gone. And so you could have a little bit of hydrochloric acid fumes coming up, and you don't want to be smelling that, that's for sure. Kind of keeping it agitated as I heat it to release all of the evaporating water. And I see lots of steam coming up, so I know it's working. It's going well. I just need to be patient. Pretty soon I think we'll start seeing that salt crusting on the inside of the test tube. We're getting down there on the volume now. And again, as you can tell, I'm keeping it pointed definitely at an angle away from me and not pointing at anybody else in case it does decide to come shooting out of my test tube. So we're at a very small volume now, and this is again where it gets a little more critical. This is more likely where it's going to come shooting out. So I'm really trying to sneak up on it and keep it stirred up in the bottom there. just releasing every little bit of gas that might try to get trapped. And again, the gas gets trapped in the forming crystals or underneath those beads, and that's where it'll cause it to shoot out. So, all right, we're very close now. Very close. You can see it's all crusting on the inside of the tube. But I still have that steam coming out the top, so we're not done yet. Got a little bit of popping going on as little bits of gas get released, trapped little bits. And so at this point, I really can't see any liquid down in there, but I can see it coming out the top. And I still see that steam coming out there, so I keep at it. That's my clue that I'm not there yet. Trying to keep the whole tube, make sure I don't have any drops on the inside wall of that tube. Okay, I think we're almost there. I'm looking at the top of the test tube. I really don't see anything else coming up out of it. And so I think we're dry. There we go. 2 down, 1 to go. The biggest mistake is trying to do this too quickly. And the trick of keeping it stirred, keeping it agitated, and keeping those boiling chips down in, initially in there is probably the biggest trick. Very easy to let this come shooting out of the test tube. So. In the flame and then out of the flame. Get that water to evaporate away. Looking good. Very good. Of course, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. I guarantee that flame is much hotter than 100 degrees Celsius. And that's why you don't just want to plunge this thing directly into the flame and just leave it there. Of course, yes, that'll get the water to boil off, but everything will come shooting out of that test tube. So you got to kind of work it a little bit. All right, we're basically there. I'm not seeing any liquid water in the bottom, but I still see that steam coming out. So we'll keep at it and get the sides dried up here as well. Top and bottom of the test tube need to be totally dry. Because we're going to weigh this again, and we don't want to be weighing water. We want all that water to leave. Okay. You can see I'm in the flame and I'm not getting any more steam coming out the top. Shut that off. Great. So now we've got our table salt in our test tubes. The last thing that remains is just to weigh them again. That way we'll be able to figure out how much we produced. Of course, not a good idea to put a hot test tube on the balance. That'll create all kinds of convection currents, and this thing will not give you an accurate reading, even if it does try to stabilize. So you want to let them cool. Of course, I just worked on this one. This one's been cooling for a while, and I'm going to just kind of pick it up and test it. If you can hold it on the back of your hand without it hurting, then you figure it's probably cool enough, and I can easily do that on this one. The back of the hand is very sensitive for temperature, and it's a good way to test that. So perfect. I'm going to go ahead and weigh this one. So here's tube A. We tear it, we put it in, and you want to record that data.
tube B. That's a little warmer, of course. It hasn't been sitting out for as long, but it's cool enough to actually weigh. Again, I can use the back of the hand test there. So put this thing to tear. There we go. There's test tube B. And now the last one, definitely too hot still. I'm going to have to give that one a little bit to cool off. Okay, it is cool enough now. I can touch it, let it cool off. So test tube C, go ahead and weigh it. It's already at 0, it's tiered well, so put it on there. All right, there's your weight for test tube C, and we're all done.